Good afternoon and welcome to City College Training Kitchens. This afternoon we are going to make a really easy dish, a pastery of chicken and apricots. Our key ingredients, we've got some unsmoked ringless back bacon, we've just got some breasts of chicken which have just been boned and skinned, we've got some semi-dried apricots, they're not completely dried, they're the ones you can eat straight away. A little bit of seasoning, so we've got some salt and pepper, some olive oil, a little hint of truffle oil, which is white truffle oil, some fresh tarragon, and when we finish we're going to put a little dressing of balsamic vinegar on it as well. That is all of our ingredients. Equipment is really easy as well. All we've got is a chopping board to prepare our chicken, with a medium-sized stainless steel bowl to mix and season the chicken. We've got a mould, in this case I'm using a loaf tin, or we could use a terrine mould. Chopping knife for the chicken. We've got a little bit of oil and a brush, just so that we can brush the tin with oil to help line it. And I've also got a large piece of cling film. This is actually 5 layers of cling film pressed together, which we will line our terrine. The final thing we need is a tray, because we'll be steaming the terrine a little bit later, and that's all we've got. So the first job is to line the terrine. So all I'm doing is taking a little bit of oil, and I'm going to brush the terrine with oil. Very simple, don't have to be too accurate. Take my large piece of cling film, push it right down into the corners. The reason that we've used several layers of cling film is basically it makes it a little bit stronger, and it also means that when we're pushing it into the corners, it's not just sort of breaking up under our fingers and moving around. It's a little bit more rigid, as it were, and that will go right into the corners and sit nice and neat. Just fold the excess down over the sides. We'll need that at the end to wrap over the top. So that's how we line it with the cling film. We then take our bacon, very simply, with the eye of the meat, as it were, rather than the tail, we just lay down into the corner, and we just work our way all the way around the terrine. When we get to the end, don't worry too much about covering every single part of the terrine here, because when we turn it out and slice it, that's waste. We lose the end, so there's no point wasting bacon on either end. So we've just got to make sure we've gone into the corner and covered the base, but if there's a little gap up here, that's really not a problem. Need a little more just on that top bit, so I'm just going to break a piece off and just pop it in there. Again, make sure that we've gone right down into the corners, so our terrine is completely lined, and we just put that to one side and we'll concentrate on the chicken fillet. The next stage is to prepare the terrine, the chicken with the apricots and all of our seasoning. So all we're doing is we're taking our chicken breasts. We can just remove the little fillet that's there already. We're not being too precise, we are just cutting the breast lengthways into around 4 or 5 strips. So it's quite chunky. The reason we want that is when the terrine is pressed and we slice, if they're all slightly different shapes and sizes, we'll have a nice marbled finish to the terrine. So we don't have to be precise. It's not a competition for who's got the neatest strips of chicken. It's all very straightforward and easy. You probably need around about 4 breasts of chicken just to be safe. We can always add some more, but rather than chopping up too many and wasting whole breasts, I'll come back just in case we need a little bit more. So we've got our strips of chicken. We've taken our tarragon, and I've just picked off the nice leaves of tarragon. So I've got some more there. We just pop them in as they are, because again they will lay into the terrine, and as we're slicing we'll each get a little piece in there. I've got some black pepper which I'll just mill to season. My olive oil, so I take a little bit of olive oil, not too much, and I also take some truffle oil. This is exceptionally strong, so we're just adding a tiny little drop just for flavour, not too much. I've also got some salt. I'm only using a tiny amount of salt because truffle oil has a bit of a salty taste to it as well, and also we've got bacon in the terrine. So that's all of our ingredients and our seasoning that's with the chicken. So all we're doing is mixing that through. Then we take our apricots and our lime terrine, we take the strips of chicken and we're just laying them lengthways in the terrine. You must always lay the chicken in the opposite direction from that which will be slicing the finished terrine, because otherwise when you slice it, the terrine is not going to have that marbled effect and there's more risk of it collapsing. So we pop all our pieces of chicken in. I've just done one quite chunky layer, about a third of the depth of the mould, making sure it's all pressed into the corners and evenly down each side. You can see there's little bits of tarragon in there, and you can even see now where this marbling effect will come from when we slice the terrine. We take our apricots, I'm leaving them exactly as they come, and we're just studding the terrine directly down the middle with 4 or 5 apricots. We're not going too mad, and we're making sure that we keep them roughly in the middle. We proceed with a little bit more chicken, and so the story goes until we've got our terrine filled to the top. So what we're aiming for is to have even layers, even amount of chicken, and in fact I'll probably need to prep a little bit more, and we end up with 2 layers of apricots and in effect 3 layers of chicken. Make sure the apricots stay near the centre of the terrine. If the apricots were on the outside, there would be more risk when we slice the terrine that the terrine would collapse, because the chicken will hold together well, the apricots will be a little bit looser inside. So in a second I'll prepare some more chicken just to finish off the top of the terrine, but for now it's as simple as that. So I put my last pieces of chicken on, and then all we do is fold over our bacon to complete the terrine. Again, we don't have to worry too much about the ends because that just becomes waste, but we need to make sure that from top to bottom this way the terrine is completely covered in bacon. Add a little bit of pressure, just make sure that we haven't got any large gaps in there. Take our excess cling film from when we previously lined originally, and then just literally pull at the sides just to make sure we've got any slack out. Fold over lengthways, fold over at the ends, and now that's ready to go in the steamer. So we're at the steamer. It can be a dangerous piece of equipment, so we open the door, just open it ajar, let the steam and the pressure escape first before we open the door completely, or that steam's going to hit us in the face. Pop that in, close the door. Leave that in the steamer probably for around about an hour and a quarter, and what we're looking for is to temperature probe the terrine and make sure that the chicken's reached a minimum core temperature of around about 75 degrees. So that will take about an hour and a half. That's it. So we're back at the steamer, about an hour and 15 minutes or so has gone past. We've checked the terrine, it's at 75 degrees, I've done that already, and same procedure, let the steam out, and then quickly duck in and grab our terrine. So as I said, we've probed the terrine, we know it's at 75 degrees. We just must always remember that we should sanitise our probe before we put it back in its case so it's clean for the next time. Then we remove the terrine from our steamer tray. Just got a small tray there. I've made myself just a rigid block, and it's covered in foil and tin foil and cling film. And we just place that. It's made slightly smaller than the opening at the top of the terrine. And then I have a similar mould, and I've got the thing full of weights. It's about 2.5 kilos of weight in here, and we pop that on the top, and what will happen, if you notice, we're going to add a little bit of pressure, and some of the excess moisture, because obviously there's been moisture from the chicken and from the bacon and such like, and there's some steam as well as obviously penetrated down the side of the terrine. We just squeeze out some of that excess moisture. If I lift it up, you can see there it comes out, and we're going to put that in the fridge, preferably overnight, but if not, certainly for several hours, with the weight on top. And as it cools, that weight, the pressure will just go down, because there's no gelatin in there, there's no setting agent as such in the terrine. We've not made a terrine using pork or beef, where there's more sort of gelatinous material in the meat, which is going to help it set. So this is purely the weight and just a bit of liquor from the chicken, the apricots and the bacon that's going to hold the whole terrine together. So we leave that and we'll come back in a couple of hours. So we've chilled our terrine overnight, we've kept all that weight on top, so there's been that pressure on the filling all the time. Now we're going to take off the weight and our top block, and inside we've got our terrine. So let's have a look. So we discard all of our rubbish. Like I was saying, the ends, it wasn't too important to cover because the first slice tends to be waste. So we just take a minimal amount off of the end so that we can then get a nice slice, nice shape. If we put our fingers, 3 fingers at the end of the terrine, I'm not pushing down with the knife. I'm just moving the knife backwards and forwards and letting the weight of the knife and the teeth cut through the terrine. If we apply too much downward pressure, the terrine will collapse. So we'll just take another slice to show you. So I've gone in with my top line, I'm supporting the terrine, 2 fingers at the back, 3 at the front, supporting that slice with my middle finger, and basically that's our slice of terrine. You can see this marbling pattern, got a little bit of tarragon there, some apricots, and you can see all the different pieces of chicken that have given you that marble texture. And there's another one there. Got a few items to garnish. I've just got a very simple piece of salad leaves, some Lola Rosso. If we wanted to, just give the terrine a little bit of height. I've got some olive oil and a little brush. We can brush the face of the cut terrine just to give it a little bit of shine, purely for presentation. Can then have a little drizzle of oil on the plate, some on our leaves, and I've also got some balsamic vinegar, which has actually been just been boiled with a little bit of sugar just to reduce it and make it like a slightly thicker dressing, and we can just have a tiny bit of that as well, and maybe just a little bit of tarragon just to garnish. And that's it. Pressed terrine of chicken and apricots with tarragon and white truffle oil.